Hey, everybody. Welcome to a special edition of Q Live. So good to see all of you. My name is Bill Selleck. Pronouns are he and him. I am Director of Technology here at Hillbrook School. I am also the chair of the Communications Committee, and you may have seen all the other episodes that were happening during Spring Q a few weeks ago. The ComCom, as we call ourselves, the Communications Committee, because teachers love acronyms, puts on Q Live. So we're so glad to finally have Amanda. Amanda, you are here. You gave us a keynote
Hello.
and you are on Q Live. Give us a quick intro. Tell us about yourself.
Hey everybody. So I'm actually here in my classroom. I am a full-time U.S. history teacher, and I used to do also train teachers in educational technology, but teaching is where my heart is. So I'm back full-time in the classroom, and I present often, which is why I was at Spring Q as well. So that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit. It's been a while since your keynote. People
Yes.
just kept talking about it. My goodness. On the Twitters, as my mom calls it, just like on and on. Just so much of it resonated. For those that either, it's been a while, like what are some of kind of the greatest hits, or those that maybe weren't able to see it and are just kind of randomly seeing this either on, Twitter or Facebook, where tell us about kind of what you talked about and what matters to you.
Yeah, so I guess the big idea of the keynote, and it took me when Q came to me and asked if I would keynote for Spring Q, such an honor. It took me a while to really figure out what I wanted to talk about, just because teaching is in such a it's such a spot right now, and so many teachers are going through it, and I wanted to be as authentic as possible, being a full time teacher, and I just started to reflect on like what is some of the changes that have really impacted me because of COVID, and some of the things I've been thinking about a lot. And so the big idea was really like what is important and what is worth my energy. So that was like the big overarching theme of the keynote was what is worth my energy and my students' energy, and how can I help preserve more of my energy so I don't get burnt out. And so some of the changes that I made specifically because of COVID were group playlists. So playlists, I was introduced to them by Catlin Tucker, and they're basically a series of blended learning activities that students can go through, and then the teacher checks in with them. But my students were also really craving collaboration because of being in remote learning for so long. And so I wanted to take that playlist model and then create it as like a group playlist where students are working and collaborating together. And then I'm checking in and assessing student learning on the spot throughout the blended learning activities. And then I'm not grading things later. So it helps preserve my energy by not having to be like sage on the stage for, every single thing that they need to learn. It's putting a lot of the learning on the students. They're interacting with their peers, and I'm assessing learning on the spot. It's been so successful in my class. Basically, I would take some of those old station rotations that I was doing, but because of COVID and the mandates to start the year, I couldn't do those station rotations, and I couldn't check in with all of my students. And so I made that switch to these group playlists, and I love it. I love the group playlist. I'm never going back. So that's one of the things I talked about. And I also talked about another thing that really saves me is grading. Like how I approach grading now is very different and intentional. So I compared it to laundry. I hate, loathe, despise laundry. And grading is kind of like on that same wavelength where it just piles up, it builds up if you don't get to it. It's so time consuming once you do actually dive into it. And so when I think about grading, I think of it as my approach of laundry. And I probably divulge too much, but I don't do my laundry anymore. Well, not all of it. I outsource it. I found like a wash
Wait,
and
what do you
fold.
do with your laundry? What do you
I
do?
know, I know. So me and my husband were like, oh my gosh, this laundry, so stressful because we never really get to it like consistently. And so we found like a wash and fold that was really affordable in our community. And we just like, once it piles up, we take it to the wash and fold, and they literally have it done the next day. So it automates it. But there's a lot of stuff for grading that does the same thing, like you don't have to grade it all yourself. And so that's kind of my approach. By the way, wash the Speedy Wash in Riverside. If anybody's out there in Riverside, that's my laundry place.
Awesome. Give them a shout. So how do
Yeah.
you what's the grade in fold then? What's the transition? What
Yeah,
does that look like?
so there's a few different components to that. Like in terms of when I bring my laundry, I can't have the wash and fold do all my laundry. Like there's some things I do have to take care of myself, like the heavy and delicate stuff. So like there's some tasks that I do have to sit down and do those things myself, and the delicate things as well. But for like a lot of the everyday stuff, when you do your instruction, like a pear deck, I don't have to go back and grade that pear deck later. We're doing it together live. It's like automatic feedback on the spot.
Sure. Yeah.
Playlists, I'm giving them that automatic feedback. But then I want to assess student learning. So like we did this whole thing, whatever it is, like you did this whole thing with the students or the students did the thing. You don't have to go back and grade every single little activity in the HyperDoc or HyperSlide. Then I just followed up with the quizzes. And then the quizzes auto grades. It's like I'm pulling all the major things that I wanted them to get out of that activity in a quizzes. And then the students, that's what's auto grading it for them. The students can reattempt the quizzes too. Like if they want to come in during office hours and like do another reattempt. But I do a lot of those things that do the auto grading. So they're still getting that live instruction from me, that like, that teaching that you normally do. But then how are they being assessed? Those assessments a lot of times can be followed up by like an automated thing, and don't have to feel like you have to grade the minutia all the time. And I think that's a big shift for some teachers, is not feeling like you have to grade everything. There's other ways that can assess their learning. It takes the burden off of you. When you have like 200 kids, it's impossible,
It's impossible. Yeah.
Possible.
Well, I love that you came at it through a lens of really taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
Because that's so important. But there are two parts baked into that are just brilliant and make so much sense. First one is autonomy. So really starting like in 6th grade, we know developmentally autonomy is a really big deal. And the more autonomy you can give to your students, the more they feel like they own their learning. So that's a really, really big thing. The other part that I don't know that you named that I'm going to name is the ability to actually give timely feedback. So even if you wanted to grade everything, it's going to take you at least a full day to grade, which is not sustainable, but it's also not timely. And so by baking in these things that will give that feedback almost instantly, students are actually more in control of their learning and getting feedback quicker than you could ever do with just one person. So I love that so much.
Yes. And that is extremely important, the timely feedback, whether it be through those automation tasks or even through the playlist, because you're giving them that direct feedback right there too. 100%. Yes.
Yeah. So we just have a few more minutes. You're actually going to teach a class soon.
I know.
But before we go, I have one important question. It's a big question. Amanda Sandoval, what matters to you?
So I really care about, I teach history. So I'm really passionate about having students learn history from diverse perspectives that represent my students. That really means a lot to me, and that I'm making sure that all of my students' needs are being met, and I'm teaching to support what they need support in. Those are all things that I'm so intentional about, like equity, anti-racism, woven into the curriculum that I put in front of my students. So those are things that are really important to me, and I'm always trying to do better on, and there's always room for growth. But those are things that I'm very intentional about and really matter to me. And having having my students enjoy learning. I love, I want my students to enjoy coming to class. So
I love that. It's so funny you mentioned right in front of me, there's another room with a shared window. We're having a parent education meeting around anti-racism right now. Do you have any favorite resources or people that you want to shout out right now?
Oh, yeah. So for sure, Teaching for Justice. That's like a big one for me, is like, facing history. I'm like looking through the history lens. UCLA, I co-presented at Spring Q with UCLA's History Geography Project. They have so many resources out there, not just for history teachers, but language arts teachers for all different grade levels. Those are some of my go-to places that I always am leaning on. UC Berkeley also has a ton of stuff, but those ones are my, for sure, like go-to number one.
Yeah. Speaking of UC Berkeley, are you connected with John Powell, Dr. John Powell?
No, I was like, Don Powell.
Yeah.
He's Riverside.
So
that's somebody else.
He founded UC Berkeley's Center of Belonging. And
I've
so
never heard of
his
that.
take, so a lot of people know about diversity. That's, making sure we have a variety of kind of humans in the room. Equity is making sure people have what they need. His take is that we need to move beyond equity into belonging. And so he founded the Center of Belonging. So if you're, all of you listening in the DEI journey, the DEI-JA journey, justice and action, and you're wondering, kind of what's the next step, definitely all those resources at Learning for Justice. but I've been really diving deep into that sense of belonging,
I
where it's
love
not
that.
just getting a variety of people, that diversity piece. It's not just making sure they have what they need, but it's really making sure that they feel like they belong there. I think it works for students, it works for teachers, staff, you name it. And the more that we can draw people in, and I hear that thread going through your keynote, through our conversations here, is it's not just learn the thing. It's like, how do you show up and feel like you own the thing? How do you feel like you're a part of this thing?
That's great. Thank you I'm going to look that up. Thank you so much. I love the
Yeah,
stuff that comes out of UC Berkeley. So I
absolutely.
believe it.
Yeah. Well, Amanda, thanks so much for joining us. How do
Oh,
humans
thank
find you on the internet?
The easiest way is my Twitter. I'm very active on Twitter. It's at History Sandoval. So that's where you can find me on there. So tag me and I'll probably reply back. Yeah. Let me know if you have any questions.
Awesome. Well, Amanda, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you all for joining us for the special edition of Q Live. And yeah, have an amazing day.
Thank you, Bill, for having me.